would go to like all these different sets and interview comedians and just be like, "How'd you do it? What's this?"
Yeah. Were you ever an entertainment journalist?
Yeah. If was your path like this?
How are you?
I'm so good. I'm actually in North Carolina right now in the lovely hotel visiting my parents.
Oh, that's so nice. Where in North Carolina are you?
Right outside of Charlotte, a little town called Belmont.
I've been to Charlotte. It's a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah,
town.
it's great. So I'm
Yes.
getting a lot of new material for my next hour.
Oh, really? You're observing things already?
That's right.
This was a great special, Fortune. Congratulations on it.
Thank you so much. I'm really proud of this one. It's yeah, my third one, and I wanted to just elevate. I just wanted to sort of present a like more grown-up version of myself, but in a bright pink suit.
Is it a little easier the third one than the first one or the second one?
I think it's easier in that the first hour, I had no idea what I was doing. I had put out 2 half hours, but with half hours, you just kind of throw jokes up at against the wall and like, this is funny, this is funny, this is funny, and nothing has a through line or, there's not a story to it. And then Sweet and Salty, I really wanted to have a narrative. I wanted it to feel like a little book, like with the beginning, middle, and end, and everything kind of come full circle. And I had never done that before. So that was the challenge with that one, was figuring out how to do that. And then now I feel like I've settled into that type of storytelling.
So how do you land on the story you want to tell in this special?
I start with just jokes. I start with like, what is a funny story that happened to me? What is a funny story from my life? And I like tonight I'm doing a show in Charlotte where I'm just like, can I tell you guys some things that have happened? And I just tell exactly what happened, and then their response tells me like what is interesting about that story, what is something that makes people laugh, and then I go, oh, that's not part of the story I thought was anything. Let me expand on that the next time I tell it. And so you're just kind of crafting it with every audience. So yeah, I just start with that, and then when I'm about 4 months from filming a special, that's when I go, let me dig back in and find the beginning, middle, and end, and what is the through line, and how do I bring this around full circle? That's when I start adding the callbacks.
One of my favorite jokes is one of my favorite stories, I should say, is the first story you tell in the whole thing, which is
Oh yeah.
about you and your wife going on your honeymoon, and then
Hmm.
you being on your phone on the plane. And where did you go? The Maldives, is that right?
Yeah, and I really did not do any research. It was somewhere my wife had always wanted to go. This opportunity came up to go, and truly the travel agent planned everything. And I discovered on the plane there that it was illegal to be gay. And I was like, oh, well, that's, you know, probably not the best decision we've made to go on our gay honeymoon. Um, and obviously it ended up being totally fine. Everyone was lovely. But you tell that story because it is the law there. At any point, someone could just decide, like, well, we know we're normally chill about this, but you know what? Today we're not chill about it. And so you kind of go, well, I'm glad I'm home. But in hindsight, that I guess was a little scary.
Can, can you talk me through, like, as much as you remember, I guess, like the just given everything you were saying, like, hey, I'm going to get up on stage in Charlotte tonight. I'm going to try some stuff out, see what works, see what people laugh
Yeah.
at. See, can you do that for that bit? Can you do that for that story? Like, when did that one?
Mhm.
When did you start telling that one, and how did it change as it went along?
That one was one of my first stories that I started working on this special because it every special of mine follows a narrative. That my first hour was me coming out, me figuring out who I was, me kind of coming into my own. My second hour was about me getting engaged, me getting married, sort of like figuring out that part of my life. And then this one is it picks up with the honeymoon. So you literally pick up from good fortune of we just got married to now we're on the honeymoon, and like what life is like now and settling into that. So I thinking of that narrative was like what happened right after I got married, and it was the honeymoon. So yeah, so it was the first story right out of the gate. And you worry that when you run a story like that for a year and a half to 2 years, that it will lose its steam. You don't ever want to overdo a story, but that one has always been consistently very good, I think, because it's so like, oh, like, yeah, that's a crazy story. And I can't believe you didn't know that.
Were there parts that you were surprised, like you were telling me, like, people will laugh at parts you weren't surprised at, and you didn't
hmm
expect that, and that kind of did that happen with that story?
The consensus was I was a dum dum for not doing any research before going on this trip, and I had not really considered that. I was like, "Yeah, doesn't don't people just go on trips willy nilly?" And they're like, "Not really." So it kind of played with my ignorance a little bit more than I would have.
I'm sort of surprised to hear that, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, there is this moment where you talk about, when you talk about the punishment for being gay in these
hmm
countries, there's also a stopover, and there's a punishment for being gay there too.
hmm
You the reaction from the audience is not laughter.
Mm-mm.
There's a couple of moments of like a couple of
Shock,
moments of
yeah.
shock and gasp. And I was wondering, like, as
Mhm.
a comedian whose job it is to get laughs, like I've spoken to so many comedians who tell me that, like, they're just trying to make sure, how many laughs per minute can I get? What is it
Yeah.
like being up there when the shock comes in, when the comes in?
That might have been one of the surprising moments because I was just reciting it as like, let me just add why this is so nerve wracking. It's nerve wracking because it can lead to 8 years in prison. It can lead to lashings. This is in their law book. Um, and I think it's one of those out of sight, out of mind things for people. Like, you know that it's illegal to be gay in certain countries, but you don't really think about it, I don't think, and you don't really know the punishment of it. And I think maybe a lot of people assume that now that the America has marriage equality and stuff, like, we're good, right? Like, you gay folks have everything you wanted, right? And you're like, well, here's the reality of the situation. There are still plenty of places in the world where, you can be killed or imprisoned just for being who you are. So all of my stories I try to keep light and fun and positive, but there are a lot of stories that have a little through line of like, but also here is some real information for you, and that's kind of scary. So I like to have that fun and silliness, but also have like a message. And it's just that, that it's a slippery slope that we, don't want to take for granted the rights we have, but we also have to be diligent about keeping the rights that we have.
Yeah, keeping the rights that we have is absolutely right. Another one of my favorite stories is when you talk about your, right after that, you talk about your growing up with your mom, and right after your
Mhm.
mom's divorce. Can we just play a little bit of that song? Do we have that?
Now, my parents divorced when I was 12, and I don't know how this happened, but I somehow became my mom's husband. Which is weird because I have two older brothers, so I don't know why I was the man of the house.
I just love this story so much. Can you tell me a little bit about your mom?
Yeah, my mom is very quirky, has a wonderful personality, very, very big and over the top. She's never met a stranger. She's very like open, like she meets people, she's hugging them. But she's growing up with a mom like that comes with some idiosyncrasies that you have to get used to. And one of the things about my mom was that, yeah, my parents divorced when I was 12, so she just kind of didn't know what to do with this like new life of like single motherhood and not having a husband. And so I don't think she realized it at the time, and I certainly didn't realize it as a 12-year-old, but I kind of became her crutch, like her person that was just sort of expected to make sure she was okay. And as a kid, you're just kind of like, I guess this is part of it. This seems like a lot of work. But when I got older, it really, again, it's one of those things I didn't really process that until I met my wife, who was like, that's not quite normal. And I'm like, huh. And then you start to play back all the history in your head, and you're going, yeah, I guess, yeah, that isn't quite normal. So for me, I'm like, there's got to be other people out there who've experienced that kind of relationship with a parent, but in particular a mother. And yeah, I have a lot of people coming up to me after the show going, I'm my mom's husband. And it's just such a funny term, I think, because being a lesbian female, just like being my mom's husband, it's kind of a funny thing. And yeah, just what kind of wanted to play around with that relationship and how it's just not quite the normal mother-daughter
Yeah.
relationship.
I'm really like, I can't begin to tell you how much I don't want to like analyze the jokes. Like, I really don't want to do it. I really don't like it. I really don't like when people on public radio shows go like, the interesting thing about your jokes is that they belay a certain sort of insecurity. But like, one thing I find funny and interesting about those two stories is
Mhm.
that the joke starts as like, so the first one is like, hey, I went on this vacation. It's illegal to be gay. Here are the jokes. But the joke is kind of on you. The kind of joke is kind of like that
Yeah.
you said that, like, hey, I didn't know that becomes part of the
Mhm.
joke. And here too, I mean, like, the joke is on your mom that she had you as her husband, but also
Yeah.
that you didn't realize that was a problem. You didn't realize that was an odd
Yeah.
thing, you know?
And that's probably the people pleaser in me, like the I'm a Cancer, just kind of wanting people in my life to be happy and steady and helping. And yeah, that's one could look at the therapy of it and think like, okay, there's some things there. But I think that's how I dealt with any of that kind of stuff, is that things that could be hard or maybe were hard in the past. I'm able to sort of put them through that comedian filter and find the light. What is the lightness of that thing?
Were you like that as a kid? Like, were you able to do that as a kid?
Yeah, I come from people that would kind of face hard times or tragedies or stress in a very comedic way. Like, I remember when my grandmother died, we were all devastated. She was like the matriarch of our family, and all of us were grieving. And then, the day of her funeral, we're sitting around laughing, telling stories and making jokes. And to the outsider looking in, it would feel very, I don't know, callous or cold maybe, but it's just how we handled grief. It's how we handled pain. And I think I genuinely filter that stuff through the lens of like, what's funny, what's light about this. Let's find the levity in it.
Were you funny like as a kid? Like, were you funny around the house? Were you funny in school and all that?
Like moments of it, I think I was a little bit shyer, a little bit quieter than people might have assumed. It took me a long time to build confidence. I was that typical like chubby kid with greasy hair and ratty clothes that just didn't quite look as cool as some of those cool kids. And I think, I was probably invisible for a while. And as I got older, discovered what a personality can do, even at a young age. Like, oh, if I can like crack a joke here and there, these people will talk to me, or I can be friends with these people. So it started to kind of become a secret superpower as I got older, where I would have like, I'd be quiet and then like really, really funny, and then kind of go back to being quiet.
Yeah.
And then that confidence just grew as I got older.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about this the other day. They were talking about their kid and something about, I think their kid was having a hard time in junior high, which I don't think you
Mm.
guys have. Like junior high, do you guys have junior high?
Yeah, well, I had junior high. Now it's middle school, but it was junior high when I was coming up.
Yeah, junior high. And someone was saying, and their kid was having a hard time, and they said, "Did you find it hard?" Like I was a bit of a shy kid, and I said,
Mhm.
"Yeah, like I had a really bad grade 7. I
Mhm.
figured out that I was funny in grade 8, and then grade 8 and grade 9 were easier." Because if
Yeah.
you can just joke around, you can not get beat up. Like if you
Yeah.
can just joke around, the people who are
Yeah.
going to beat you up, they'll laugh and they might not. It is a superpower. It really is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, I really think I came into my own once I moved away to college, once I kind of got under, away from just everyone that I grew up with and kind of could start anew. They didn't know me as ever being shy. They just
Yeah.
knew me as all of a sudden the funny person. So I got to sort of start this new path of making people laugh.
So when you went to LA, that wasn't for comedy, right?
No, I went out there, I got a job opportunity, and I just kind of went as a life experience. Like
What
it
was the
was
job?
it was a personal assistant job, and I
Oh,
had met someone through a connection in North Carolina, and
to like Burt
I,
Reynolds or something? To
I wish.
was it? I don't know why. I don't know why I went right to Burt Reynolds, but in my mind it was mustache
Yeah,
trimmers and all that.
she was an actress who's not really doing, I don't think she's even acting anymore, but it was a perfect way to just start to see how I felt about LA, but I had done theater in college, had never done comedy, never done stand up or improv or any of that. And I had a hard time making friends in LA. It's a very difficult place to connect with people. They're not really interested. Everyone kind of stays in their own lane. So I started taking improv classes at a school called the Groundlings, where all these SNL people had gone to. And yeah, it was like a light bulb had gone off. Like, oh my God, where has this been?
What do you remember
Um,
about that light bulb going off? Like, what was that? What happened that the light bulb went off?
I think it was just that I didn't know. I had seen an improv show once in college and I thought, wow, that looks really fun. And I actually even went to like, I think like an intro class where they were like, oh, you can come do this for free. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then you get like a little taste of it. And then they were like, well, actually, to do the classes is going to be like $600. And as a broke college kid, I was like, well, there goes
Not too
that.
bad,
So
yeah.
I just kind of left it in the past and didn't think about it again. And now as an adult, I was like, oh, well, actually now self-sufficient. I've got a job. I could pay for this. And I just remember the teachers consistently just saying, hey, like, you're really good at this. Like you need to keep doing this. And I was just having fun. I was like everybody else, just like, oh, this is very silly. We're walking like a duck and coming up with characters. Like, isn't that neat? I didn't think it could be like a job. And I think it was my teachers reinforcing this to me that made me go, huh, there is something here. And then when I got in front of an audience for the first time, that was the big light bulb. That was the feeling of making people laugh was like nothing I'd ever experienced before.
Do you remember any of the like early sketches where you started to get those big laughs? And do you remember any of those sketches and what they felt like?
Yeah, I particularly remember I was in a group at the Groundlings called the Sunday Company, where you're in it for 6 months and they vote on you every 6 months, and you can do it up to a year and a half as long as you're continuously voted back in. And we would put up a new show every Sunday, kind of like in the vein of Saturday Night Live. And the theater's small; it's only like 100 seats, but it's a very reputable theater. It's iconic, and the laughs in that room when you nailed a sketch in that room, because it was so intimate and small, that laughter just was like a ball of energy just right in your face. And the first time I put up a sketch and it did well, it was like the greatest feeling. I think I was an old woman that played my with who had a husband who played the guitar, and I sang like opera style, and we sang about recycling. I think that was my first hit. That's what I love about the Groundlings is you get to be a lot of characters and wear crazy costumes and wigs, and it just sort of feels like a playground.
A lot of the Groundlings end up on SNL, or a lot of SNL
Hmm.
people come from the Groundlings.
Yeah.
Was that the path you thought? Is that what you thought was the path?
That's what I had dreamed of, because that was my only access to comedy as a kid. I wasn't familiar with stand up other than Adam Sandler. I like was obsessed with his CD and learned all of his music when I was in 8th grade.
Yeah, Toll Booth Willie.
SN
Who can hate it? I
Yeah,
get you.
right?
Like we can't do it on the air, but it's good. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yes, and learning the Thanksgiving song and the
Yeah,
Hanukkah song,
yeah.
all the songs. And then yeah, SNL was like a staple for me. So that was the dream. And I tested twice for them. They flew me out twice, 2009, and then they saw me at the Groundlings. In between that, flew me out again 2010. So 3 times I showcased for them. And it just didn't happen.
What are those auditions like?
Sort of that old school Broadway thing where you see like there's a corner of people at a table with the lights. Everything's completely dark, but like a little lamp above them, and you can't really see their faces, but you can hear some laughter and then a lot of silence. It's it's sort of that old school Broadway feeling. You're on the stage, they film it, and it's very intimidating
Yeah.
because, I was I was pretty new into comedy. I think at that point I'd only been doing comedy 4 years, very green, and just, had I auditioned maybe 3 years later, I think I would have been a whole other performer, but that just wasn't the path. But a cool experience. You're walking on that hall and you're seeing all the pictures of the host and the cast, and you're in their dressing rooms. You're their makeup artists are doing your makeup and hair. It's like the coolest thing ever. Even though I didn't get it, I'm so honored that I got to be a person that got to be there and try.
And do I get the timeline right that like Chelsea Handler, who had Chelsea lately at the time, like the late night show, she sees something in you, like
Mhm.
you end up writing for her, like, or you end up performing, and there's like that's a bit of a how did that come about?
Yeah, so 2009, 2010 was that SNL time where I was really focused on improv and sketch and doing that. And then that didn't happen. 2010, I did Last Comic Standing. So I was like, okay, well, I don't think the SNL thing's happening, but the stand-up thing's pretty interesting. And Last Comic Standing was my first time on television. So all of a sudden I started getting booked to do stand-up. So I was like, well, let me see what this path is. And so it was 2011 where the beginning of 2011, her show was huge at the time, and they were
Yeah.
looking for a new writer. And I thought, well, I'm not having any luck getting on television. Maybe I'll have more luck as a writer because I was a journalist for 7 years. It
Good
was
idea.
my
Good idea to get out of that, by the way.
yeah,
Smart move.
right.
Yeah, smart move. Good idea.
Yeah, I was an entertainment journalist for
Oh,
seven
even worse.
years.
Get out of
I
that.
know,
Don't
I
do
know.
that. Don't do
Asking
that.
people what they're wearing. No, thank you.
Yeah, asking them
But
questions about their comedy.
it was a great job that right. I used it as a way to like go to people like comedy sets and interview comedians and sort of get all this knowledge
Oh,
behind the
really?
scenes.
Like you would you would
Yeah.
you would find a way to like talk to.
Yeah, I interviewed like Gaffigan, Sarah Silverman, like gosh, Bill Engvall. I would go to like all these different sets and interview comedians and just be like, "How'd you do it? What's this?"
Yeah. Were you ever an entertainment journalist?
Yeah. If was your path like this? And yeah, I kept the lights on, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And so I submitted a packet and she ended up hiring me. At SNL, there were a lot of people rooting for me and a lot of people trying to get me on that show. So I've always been lucky. There was someone in my corner. And that Chelsea, she was the last person to make that decision. And she saw something in me and she liked putting people on TV that weren't the normal people you saw on TV. Cause back then, 2011, it was not to your benefit to be different, to be outside of the norm. Now it's very welcome. People are like, "You're so unique. We love that." They did not like that in 2011. That
You really
was
felt that in 2011? You really felt that?
absolutely. Every room I went into was, "We don't know what to do with you. Like you're so different. You sound different. You look different. We just don't know where to put you." All the time for years. And now it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness you're different. I mean, I'm so happy that individuality is being celebrated more now, but that she was a rare bird at that time to put those kind of people on TV.
I wanted to ask you about the Handsome podcast,
Yeah.
which has just kind of taken off.
Yeah, it's been very like we all were just pretty blown away at the initial reception. We knew Tegan approached us about doing a podcast, and we all three chatted about what it would be and what it would look like. And neither one of us knew. We knew May and not super well, but we really liked May, and we were like, let's just kind of try this. We're all from a different generation, and we know each other but not well, so it's kind of us getting to know each other and also looking at things from a different era and 30s, 40s, 50s and what that looks like, answering questions. And yeah, we're a little over a year. We have 25 million downloads.
Man, oh man.
And every show I do, people show up in these our shirts and they're yelling out our phrases. I mean, I haven't been a part of, I've done a lot of cool things, but I've never been a part of something with such a fandom. I don't know what the right word is, but like where they really care about this podcast.
For people who don't know, the Handsome Podcast is Tig Notaro, and Canadian, by the way, Canadian.
That's right, from Toronto.
Does their Canadianness ever come out? Do they ever say things and
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
oh yeah, we don't know what that is?
Yeah, because our producer's also Canadian, and they'll like talk about Canadian things, and we're like, "What? What is that?" And they're like, "Oh, you don't know what that is?" And we're like, "No." And definitely the accent comes out with the A, and
Oh
the
yeah, there's a little bit
like
of that.
a
Yeah.
little bit of I'm trying to think what words. Pasta.
Pasta?
Yeah, we say
What?
pasta.
Ooh, excuse me.
Yeah, listen, Tom, it's
Excuse
all
me,
right.
Madame Rockefeller.
Well, I filmed in Toronto for 2 summers this last doing a food bar, and everybody says pasta up there, and it always makes me laugh.
I didn't know that. Hold on, March, you're Italian. Do you say? March is Italian. He's behind there. He says
He
pasta.
says a pasta.
But he's pasta.
With
Yeah, he
the,
does.
with the
Okay, I
hand like
understand.
that.
Yeah, he was doing that actually, and he was holding onto a baguette, which is something I'm going to get an HR complaint about. Why do you think that podcast has taken off? Like, and maybe this is maybe someone who's not you is best to answer it, but like, why do you think there's this dedicated fandom? And
I'm not sure. I mean, we each came to the podcast with our own fan bases, so
yeah, but I know people who have discovered all three of you through that show, right?
yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it was. I think my friends, it's one of the few things that I have my friends listen to as well. I've been in a million TV shows. They've not seen one episode, but they will text me about the podcast. And I think we're very goofy and silly. And at any given time, two of us know something that one of us doesn't, and they can't fathom that one of the people or two of the people don't know us, like bread and butter pickles. They were like, "What is that?" And
I don't know what
everyone's
that
like,
is.
"You don't?" Oh, like,
What are bread and butter pickles?
It's a sweet pickle. It's like it's just a pickle chips that are kind of sweet. And they didn't know what it was either. But I got like 400 messages from people saying I was screaming at the radio. I couldn't believe they didn't know it. So it's a very like bonkers, ridiculous podcast that people I think they just laugh a lot. That's the only thing I can guess.
I get that sometimes. We where I'm from in Newfoundland, we say like colored pencils, like blue pencils.
Mhm.
Yeah, we call them leads.
Oh yeah, I've not heard that.
And I didn't know that we were the only people that called them leads.
Yeah, that's one I've never heard. But that's kind of the fun of the pod is that it's kind of about nothing and it's about everything.
Yeah.
Like we talk because people are asking us a question every week, it opens the door to so many conversations that we would never like think of on our own. So I like that aspect of it. It's there. I never know what the question's gonna be, and so it forces me to go, well, what do I think about that thing, or what do I like? Because as a performer, as a comedian, you kind of like, I don't have any more stories to share. I feel like I've told everything, and that pod always brings out new stuff in us.
The last question I have for you is in everything, when I was getting ready for this, like every article about you and everything I read about you is people talking about, oh, it's just so joyful, like in this time of like great division, like just such joy, like such unifyingness, such, I could see you nodding along there. Like, is that intentional? Like, is that something is that a byproduct of the comedy that you naturally make? Or are you thinking like, hey, I do want to make something that's joyful right now?
I think it's both. I think it is partly this is genuinely who I am. Though if you ask my mom when I'm cranky, she would disagree.
Yeah.
But for like 95% of the time, I'm fairly joyful. I'm fairly I'm very grateful that I'm a person who I wake up and the glass is half full. Like that is a natural feeling and reaction for me. And I know many people don't feel that naturally. And I realize that's a real blessing to like just in my body feel it. So I think that comes out through my point of view. My brain sees things with the lens of a happier outlook and a more positive outlook. And so what I write tends to be on that spectrum. Um, so I think it's part of who I am, but then I also like putting out positive things, like happier things, because, and I think I've leaned into that more in the last few years because it has been, especially since the pandemic, a time of like, there's just a lot of crap going on. People are like really bummed out a lot and nervous and scared, and there's a lot more anxiety than I've ever seen in society. And I don't want to add to that. I don't need to be like stirring the pot. There's plenty of other people that do that and like that. I'm not trying to be like the center of attention in a negative way. I'm not a person that I'm not a all any press is good press. I don't want that. I just like I like being a part of a positive conversation and like, did you see this funny joke that Fortune had? But I don't need people talking about me 24/7 or in an involvement in crazy things. I just want it to be like I'm contributing something happy and good that I hope for like 5 minutes or an hour, it makes people feel a little bit better.
Fortune, nice to meet you. Thanks for doing this.
It's so nice to meet you. Thank you.
This is a real joy. Thanks for making the time.
Well, I appreciate you talking with me and teaching me about colored pencils called
Leads.
leads.
Yeah.